First of all, I have to thanks Kubernetes Sri Lanka organization giving me the opportunity to present this kind of webinar for Sri Lankan community after a long time. So talking about let's because first I need to tell you about one thing about this Kubernetes security AWS. So this topic is a little bit we need more time to describe and go to a little bit harder. It's a little bit hard to give more details within like 1 hour. If I am going with this Kubernetes security, whatever security topic, definitely we needed a kind of a boot camp for 2-3 days. Anyway, I'm trying my best to give you some idea about how we can implement the Kubernetes security and what are the main areas we need to consider when we are working with the Kubernetes with AWS. Let's get the ball rolling now. As I mentioned, so talking about me, I don't need to talk a lot about me. So as a general, I'm working as a solution architect and the DevOps engineer nearly 9 years in Sri Lanka and also the New Zealand. Last 4-5 years, I'm working at New Zealand, the different companies like this. And if you need any more details about me, or if you need to know about what I'm doing, what are the things I'm interested in, stuff like that. So I'm generally available in this LinkedIn and also GitHub, a few other community based URLs are there. You can go through it. So talking about the Kubernetes, why I'm doing that kind of presentation, I have wide area experience with the Kubernetes and also the working as a consultant who is doing the digital transformation with the different types of company. So hopefully you guys happy with me what I'm doing. So let me know if there are any concerns and the questions after I did the this presentation. When I talk about the Kubernetes and the security, it's a little bit hard to talk about wider areas. I just grab with the AWS especially. So when you are working with the Kubernetes and trying to set up in the AWS, there are different ways you can set up in Kubernetes with AWS. These are the few solutions which you are using currently in the Kubernetes. There are a lot of things, there are a lot of tools you can use to set up the Kubernetes, especially like most people, the most famous one is the KEOPS, and also the QSpray. It's a little bit older one, and also previously it's coming with the CloudFormation. Now it is coming with the Ansible. Talking about the KEOPS, it's kind of an open source tool which most of people using for the Kubernetes orchestration. Backend it is Terraform. So if you guys familiar with Terraform and the you may use KEOPS, and it has a lot of features and plugins, and we can easily manage the Kubernetes with KEOPS, especially in the production environments. QSpray is also not bad. You can not only the AWS, you can use other other cloud environments like GKS. If it is you have the bare metal, you can use QSpray also. So the other thing, the third one is the AWS EKS, that is the managed service which is in AWS. If you are working with the production and large production environment, you may know about the still EKS is not good solution, but there are some limitations. So, but not too bad. So still they are growing up. They have different types of tools like EKS CTL, which is also growing up. And if you want to use any other third-party tools like Rancher, if you have a little bit more money for your project, or you have a lot of funding and you need to go for the enterprise products, you can use Rancher. There are a lot of tools other than that, and you may use on Terraform. You need to set up EKS in the AWS. So EKS CTL mostly use CloudFormation in the backend. It's create the CloudFormation templates. So, but you don't need to worry about that. You need to use same as the KEOPS. If you guys familiar with KEOPS, you can have one YAML file, then you can trigger it, and that will be make your Kubernetes environment. So now go through with the main topic, that is Kubernetes security. Kubernetes with AWS. So if you go for the if you Google it, how to implement Kubernetes or what are the best practices Kubernetes in AWS, you may find out a lot of pages and a lot of discussions, a lot of areas. Like mainly, if you go for the security wise, we can categorize Kubernetes securities different ways. Like mainly infrastructure security, port security, running security, runtime security, and the network security, and the multi-tenancy, identity access, and these are the other things you need to consider. So today's what I'm going to do is, we have only 1 hour, so what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to talking about few main 10 topics, so 10 main points. So I'm go through with most of the major areas which if you are doing any pen testing, or if you are doing any Kubernetes hardening in your environment, what are the things you need to consider mainly. But I need to tell you one thing. So, but this Kubernetes is kind of a application which have a lot of components. So working with the Kubernetes and working with the live environment, you need to think about your workflow and also your repository management and stuff like that. It is kind of a bigger flow. Not only the Kubernetes, you need to make sure how you are doing the continuous integration. So the whole process should be secure. So anyway, let's get the ball rolling about the main points. So as I mentioned, I'm trying to give you some kind of pain points regularly people talking about with the Kubernetes, and also the what are the best practices we can implement in the Kubernetes. So first thing is, any software, if you're using whatever software, definitely you need to up to date it to the latest version. If not, it could be vulnerable. Let's say you are using the Java application, you are running on the Node.js, definitely talking about Node.js, definitely you need to up to date, otherwise it could be vulnerable. So time to time, new issues coming back, so you need to make sure your application is up to date, and it should run in the latest versions. So the hardest thing is, if you are running with the Kubernetes with the large environment, how we can do that? So what are the things we need to consider? So that is the main question. So anybody can say you need to up to date. So the hardest thing is how you perform your updates. So that is the main thing. So when we considering the Kubernetes, so as I mentioned, the previous tools like KEOPS or EKS, so mainly talking about KEOPS. KEOPS has its own rolling updates and the procedure to update the Kubernetes, and the EKS also same. So talking about the release versions, you need to make sure you have the latest among like 3 versions only recommended the Kubernetes for latest 3 versions. You need to make sure you are running on the Kubernetes with that latest versions in the production environment especially. So if you guys working with the Kubernetes last few years, definitely you guys know about this bigger challenge happened in 2018, which is one of famous vulnerability happened in the Kubernetes that's I mentioned in this. What happened was that version was v1.10, and these 3 versions so if I highlighted it, these 3 versions 11 1.10 11 and 1 v11 and also v1 12 versions the long time back. So what happened was at that time there's an issue bug with the Kubernetes API. So easily when pod running in your Kubernetes environment, at that time the pod is vulnerable, or somebody attacker comes to the pod, easily can communicate to the Kubernetes API, which can control easily. So that is the major concern that happened long time back. But anyway, everybody working together, and most of the clusters they update. But some companies I heard about, they had some issues at that time. So mostly when you are working with the tools like software anyways, so you need to consider these kind of issues. So talking about how we can secure when we are using the Kubernetes, and how we can maintain that your environment, so making it not vulnerable. So that is the main problem, main task, as I mentioned earlier. So I suggest, let's say if you have 3 kind of environments, so 5 environments, like let's say dev, int dev, and QA, and staging and production, or whatever other environments. I'm suggesting when you have a cluster, 5 clusters, definitely every 3 months you can get the stable Kubernetes version. So what you can do is you can schedule proper rollout for your pre-prod environment. First, check whether your components are working. Is there any all APIs are there which affect to your environment? Definitely you need to rolling up so your third party to third party applications and stuff like that. Maintain your availability of the production, not doing it like suddenly. So I also face when I'm working with the environment, I also face few issues while we're doing auto updates. So yeah, this it is challenging, but if you implement properly the your monitoring tools, so which you can easily get the alerts from what happening in your environments, so that will be the main points. So I will discuss about those audit logs and the monitoring solutions later. So that is the main thing. First, we need to up to date our Kubernetes, maintain the Kubernetes versions if you want to secure your environment. So the second part is the most other important thing. So hardening about the node security. So I'm not talking about a lot about the Kubernetes components, because I hope you guys know about the Kubernetes components and you are familiar with you guys working on the Kubernetes. I feel like that. So I'm just continuing the presentation like that. So maybe anybody maybe have maybe anybody is a beginner. So sorry about that, but I need to continue this presentation who have the kind of actually the who have the experience in the Kubernetes. Sorry about that. Okay. Talking about the server hardening, so you know about when you spawn the Kubernetes cluster, you have mainly two components. One is your masters, which are running on your Kubernetes administration applications, as example, API and scheduler, stuff like that. So other one is nodes, basically your application running on those nodes. Those are the two main components. When you set up it in the AWS, especially like KIOPS, so you control whole infrastructure. But if you are considering in the EKS, you're only controlling your nodes. So your masters don't need to worry about. They have the if you are in the PCI compliance or any other compliance, definitely they will give you that compliance. So you only need to worry about the masters. But the other hand, if you are managing your whole cluster, you need to consider about the security with the whole infrastructure. So in that case, so not only the Kubernetes, first thing about the Kubernetes, the Kubernetes wise, you need to go for each and every nodes and you need to manage. So about definitely your IAM, so which AMI, which you are using in the Kubernetes Kubernetes nodes and the masters. So you need to scan your environment time to time. It may be like every day or every week, depending on your requirement. So you can use different types of tools to do that. So basically, you can set up what you can do is in the EKSCTL also you can set up the Bootstrap to implement your software or whatever third-party tool agent running on your node. Let's say if it is Linux, it is running on the Linux. So then you can see your vulnerabilities. What are the OS vulnerabilities running on your environments? You can use AWS Inspector to do that. You can use Tenable.io or whatever other tools you can use depending on your requirements or depending on your budget. So make sure your OS is running on perfectly and it has no vulnerabilities. So what happened if it is vulnerabilities happen? What you can do is you can regularly update, check whether what are the latest updates. And most of the softwares like Inspector or Tenable.io only telling you what is the vulnerability. So then the next step is you need to define how you going to rolling out the those vulnerable solutions for the vulnerabilities. So the second thing is the controller network access. Control the network access to the access and the sensitive ports. So Kubernetes running, as I mentioned, the Kubernetes running on a lot of tools and the API and also other services running on there with the different types of ports. So if you go for the Kubernetes and find out what are the main ports, make sure those ports are only running on only allow for your local environments. That means the local VPC, and also you can not only the VPC, you can segment into your private subnet also. And the other thing is the Kubernetes API, which area, let's say which VPCs, which areas you need to expose your API. that's only that area you can expose. As example, you have multiple VPCs and you have one VPC for, like, the accessing for the Kubernetes nodes to doing the administrations and stuff like that. So better to have a different VPC and set up there like a jump host and accessing through the jump host to your nodes. So definitely you need to use like as I mentioned in here, you can use definitely the VPN and VPC segmentation properly. Then you can access for the nodes. That's also make sure your nodes are secure. So to do that in AWS, you definitely know there are two stateless and stateful firewalls setup. You can set up in the ACL and security groups. You can make sure your security groups and ACLs are properly set up. And the other thing in the node security, let's say when you are designing the Kubernetes cluster, better to have designed different types of node groups depending on your application. Let's say you have multiple microservices which needed different types of flavors, like different types of applications are there. You can divide it into multiple node groups. Let's say if you need specific AWS instance type. So depending on the type, you can make sure you have the different types of node groups. That's also good practice when you are doing that. Also make sure you have the different types of different types of node groups that will be help you to secure your environment if something happens in specific node groups. But that's also depending on the attack or security effect depending on the type. But better to have different types of group. It will be help you to manage your microservices and also the security. And the other one is always you need to restrict your access, especially for the administration. So if you don't need to have any, like if you have a DevOps guys here, you don't need to have access to developers to giving them to access to the nodes, manage the nodes and stuff like that. Definitely make sure you tidy up your access from the Kubernetes main nodes and the masters and stuff like that. So, and also you can use AWS CloudTrail or AWS VPC logs definitely to the monitoring, like monitoring tools like Prometheus and EKS, New Relic. So whatever Datadog, depending on the requirement or depending on your budget. So you can make sure you are monitoring your access levels and also who going to access and when going to access, stuff like that. Make sure your environment, everything is recorded somewhere. That will be easy to find out if some miscellaneous something happened in your environment to identify what's happened and when happened. Okay. The other thing is talking about the hardening of the Kubernetes nodes. You need to make sure hardening your APIs. So talking about the API, so if you, I just share this link. If you go for this link, you can find out there are different arguments you can pass through when you are deploying the Kubernetes with either KEOPS or mostly EKS. It support by most of the security components. But if you are managing the Kubernetes with KEOPS, you need to make sure you use like proper arguments. Like as example, I mentioned to make sure you disable the unauthorized anonymous access, TLS access for the API. So that is one example. That's a major example. So main thing you need to consider. And also other one is the secure your ECTD. XCTD, that is the key value store, which have all the your data, like your credentials and stuff like that, keys, everything is there. So make sure you encrypted your etcd and also make sure you enable the TLS there and make sure your etcd is secure always. If something going wrong, that will be the main problem. So if somebody accesses the ECTD, it can be, that guy can do a lot of things. So make sure your etcd is in proper secure way. So other one is the kubelet. Kubelet is running on the each and every nodes, which is running on your microservices. Make sure your kubelet also running on the proper arguments, like as example, anonymous access, auth, false flag, and as example, the admission control. So talking about the admission control, the Kubernetes, it has admission control, which control your Kubernetes environment. So as example, you can restrict your nodes, what application you want to run and what applications you not want to run. And there are a lot of other features in admission control. I will talk about that a little bit later. So you can make sure limit your nodes to restrict your nodes, which is not running any anonymous stuff in your nodes. So that is another concern definitely you need to consider. So as I mentioned, the Kubernetes included many more components, and all the components like Kubernetes scheduler, Kubernetes scheduler, which is used to schedule your stuff, and the Kubernetes controller manager that is control everything. Those ones also you need to consider what are the what are the what are the main plugs you need to pass through when you secure your Kubernetes environment. And also the other thing is make sure when you're hardening in your Kubernetes environment, so definitely make sure you have the logs shipping into the central login. You can easily see what are the things happening in your environment, specifically these components. So that will help you to make sure your environment is happy, or if it is something going wrong. Uh, So the other third thing is, if you definitely if somebody come into your office environment and want to do the pen testing, definitely pen testers, they are looking at this one first. So that is the cloud metadata access. Talking about the cloud metadata access, cloud metadata is used to get the details from the let's say if you are running in the EC2 in your EC2 running on the application. So if you assign a IAM role into the EC2, so or if you let's say if you need to know about through your EC2, you need to know about what are the things assigned into that EC2, what are the permissions and what are the details of the instance and stuff like that. AWS metadata API you can help you to do that. So when you have access to the API, there are a lot of things you can see. You can see your AWS IAM access and stuff like that. And also not only that, through that you can get other few details also, other specific details which is can be harmful for your environment. So why that I'm saying that is harmful, it's because of if you are running the Kubernetes in your environment, it has Docker pods running on your environment. Let's say the Docker has some kind of feature. Actually, it's a kind of a vulnerable feature. Mostly that is talking about everybody. Let's say you have a node running on the with the IAM. If you're running the application in the same node which is running on the your pod, that pod inherit that node IAM role. So then if you curl as example, if you curl like this, so curl like this 196, that is the IP for the AWS metadata. So if you curl it, you can easily get the that particular node permission node. It inherit actually it working as a node. So you can see everything which has the access to that node. So that is the bad thing. Then you can inherit. So not only that, in the Kubernetes KOps, so you have the S3 access. Then you can go for the S3 buckets which have the secrets. Then you can easily get the secret from that pod. So that is the main disadvantage when you are using the Kubernetes with AWS or whatever any other cloud provider which running with Kubernetes. That will be the main issue. So lots of people know about this issue, and there are a lot of solutions you can set up to not to happen anything like this. So I think you can get some understanding what I'm doing is here. So I can get the all the data in here. Then you can curl the particular metadata details, and through that, so IAM already assigned the IAM role into that spot. So you can run S3 bucket. So normally KOps S3 buckets locate like this. You can get the cert, and through the admin cert, you can do the kubectl easily and run any pod in your environment, and you can do a lot of things. So to make sure not to happen this thing, what you can do, there are a lot of ways you can do. You can set up the most people doing actually the third one, that is kube to IAM, that is already coming with the EKS. That is kind of a different tool you can set up in the your environment, that you can control your IAM access and IAM role control from the pod wise. Let's say if your pod want to access the S3 bucket, if your pod want to access the DynamoDB, so you can give you the control IAM control to the pod only that particular service through that kube to IAM. So, and the other one is the network policy. You can set up a network policy but not need to actually access the metadata. So like this, if you are using, most of the people, if you are not familiar with the kube to IAM, most of the people use AWS credentials, like API keys to authenticate. You are get the access. So that time you can totally block your metadata from the pod. So that is the other way you can secure your environment easily. Let's say if you're running on the little bit older cluster, so you don't need to have a time to let's say you don't have a time to do the kube to IAM for now, so you can go for this solution first, and the meantime you can change it, these kind of solutions. Actually, the nowadays it is coming with like different solutions, not only these ones. The EK is coming with the different types of new solution near future, definitely that will solve this problem. So the fourth one is I need to talk about the RBAC. So RBAC is role-based access control. So when you're running with the Kubernetes, so let's say if you have different types of microservices running on different namespaces, so how are you going to give the proper permission to your application? So that is the RBAC coming to the Kubernetes coming to the stage. So RBAC support for 1.6 Kubernetes version. So it has two components, that is role and the cluster role. So mainly cluster role is, let's say if you need to manage your whole cluster control, you can use cluster role. It not specify with the role, so it not specify with the namespace. Let's say you have multiple namespaces in your cloud, in your environment. What you can use is you can use roles to control the each and every namespaces, namespace wise applications. Let's say your one service need to talk to specific another service. What you can do is you can create a service account and create a role which enable you access, which give you a proper access. That service account add to the role, and you can do what the application can easily get the access from that. So this is a good example for that thing. So what you can do is you can create this is the cluster role, which is give you, let's say, the cert access for the get watch and the list that will be applied for you all the namespaces. So let's say somebody need to access these certs, so no need to block the namespace wise. You can create this cluster role, and you can bind that to the cluster groups depending on, let's say, your manager need to read the stuff, or if you have an application need to have this credential, needs to have this permission, you can create a service account and run the service account in your deployment. So that is the easiest way to giving the permission to the user base and the application base in the RBAC. So other thing is, as I mentioned, the roles. So if you need to tidy up your environment in the namespace basis, let's say you have multiple namespaces, you need to tidy up the users and the control the namespaces wise, you may use this RBAC control, the role-based permission. That is really important. Let's say if you before these 1.6, it's really hard to control the permissions in the Kubernetes. That will be a painful time. So, but now we have the more control. So if you need to, if let's say if you have multiple developers working with the Kubernetes and multiple application need multiple different types of access controls, so you need to make sure you put right RBAC setup in the right way. That is more important. No need to give you more permission for the applications which is running on. Sometimes if you are struggling with some application issues, you will give you more permissions and troubleshoot, then you will forget something you will forget that, so which permission you change. So make sure all the permissions are recorded, and make sure you are always review the policies in the Kubernetes applications. That should be a best practice when you are doing the deployments. Talking about fifth one, that is the TILA, that is Helm to Pain. So everybody know about the Helm 2. If you are deploying the Kubernetes containers, you can use Helm to deploy this stuff. There are multiple ways you can do that, but most people use Helm. That is the server client base application. That is this Helm 2, which is used to deploy the templates into the Kubernetes. You can have multiple versions. Depending on the version, you will deploy your applications. Like the release, it will be help you to do the continuous integration and the delivery. But the pain point with the Helm is, so if you are putting the Helm with unorth, that will be a bigger trouble. So you can see this slide. So I'm running on the pod there, and I'm trying to get the Tila. Tila is a pod which is running on the Kubernetes, which if you deploy in the Helm through the Helm to Helm, so what Helm doing is Helm talking the Tila, sorry, Tila pod, and Tila talking to the Kubernetes. So that is the pain point for the Helm 2. So in that case, so you can see I just try to set up a Helm in this pod, and also using this using this application, I can easily output the Tila token, so which is talking to the Kubernetes cluster. If you have that token, so if you have no SSL integration with the Tila, so you can easily talk to that, and you can get the credentials for the Kubernetes. Then what you can do is, as a user, what you can do is you can create a static pod. So like this, whatever pod, static pod, or you can deploy a pod into the Kubernetes. And I just mount the root volume in here, which is another bad thing. If you mount the root volume like this, it will inherit the node root volume into the pod. So you can see I just the deploy through that token, and you can I just create a secondary pod in here, and this is the pod I deployed as a secondary pod. So then you can see I just cd into the pod root directory. Then you can check the host name. You can see that pod have the access to the master node. So that is the bad thing. So then you can edit your authorized keys and copy your key. You don't need to worry about this pod, kill the pod, and the next time you have the access. So that is the other pain point. If you have the Helm running on your environment, make sure you have the better control your Helm with the Tila. So today we don't need to worry. Helm 3 is coming back. It not have any Tila. You don't need to worry about it. Directly call into the Kubernetes API. So you can talk to the API. It's remove Tila, replace the client server with the client library architecture, secure in user base, and also it has stored in cluster certs, and the release objects metadata has changed, and also release persistent on the release namespace basis, not the Tila namespace. The previously, what you need to do is you can create a namespace and running the Tila in the namespace, and you deploy this stuff with the different namespaces. So in that case, what you do is you need to have a RBAC access to the Tila to deploy the whole stuff. That means Tila have more access, which somebody access the Tila, it can do a lot of things. So this case, what you can do is namespace-based deployments. So which help you to do the more secure deployments. And let's say if you have currently Helm 2 running on your environment, better to go for this application, Helm 2 3. Sorry, that will be sorry about that. That will be help you to convert your Helm charts into Helm 3. So I recently did that. Actually, that is really fun time, and you have like a lot of issues sometimes when you're doing that. Like some, let's say, some third-party applications not supposed to work with the Helm 3. Anyway, that's pain point. Still, it is work with the different third parties. Like let's say you have third-party tools, like let's say different agents you are running on your Kubernetes, which have Helm 2 old support APIs. So it will be not work with the Helm 3, but most of the time it's working fine. So you may have to rewrite those Helm charts into Helm 3 sometimes. But make sure if you are still running on the Helm 2, what you can do is you can set up the Tila SSL, so that will have handshake, and it has the SSL based authentication for the Kube API, Kubernetes API, and you need to pass the your keys while you are doing the Helm deployments. So that is the other thing you can do if you are running with the Helm 2. Okay. We discussed a little bit longer discussion about different issues like so. But when you are talking about the Kubernetes environment, definitely you need to working on your containers, which is running on the Kubernetes. I think few weeks back, I think the one of lady just described about these container best practices in the this webinars. So, but I didn't got the chance to actually join to that session. But anyway, mostly maybe she will be she already cover these things. But when you are working in the Kubernetes, definitely you need to follow the better workflow for your container images. So because your containers running on the Kubernetes, if it is vulnerable, your Kubernetes, if you put some vulnerable container in your environment, that will be break your whole stuff. So make sure you tidy up your container images. I will go through what are the things we need to think about when you are doing that. Need to have base minimum image. If you have like images, I work with the different companies. A lot of companies they don't think about the security when you are doing the. I did a lot of projects and stuff like that, doing some stuff. Most of the things, developers and also the lot of people, not only the DevOps, everybody not thinking about the base image versions and not up to date them. Definitely you need to consider about this. So you need to have a minimum image which not running in the stuff which you are not needed. Let's say you are building tools and stuff which you are used to build this stuff and stuff like that, especially troubleshooting stuffs. No need to put anything. If you are running Java, put only Java running on the container. Up to date the image, and also use IAM, and the other one is talking about the images. The second thing is image registry. So Docker registry. Let's say if you are using AWS, so you may use AWS ECR, you may use Harbor, you may use your own Docker registry which is running on your environment. So make sure either you need to use, if it is AWS, like let's say EKS, definitely no need to worry about. You can control it from the IAM roles and know whatever the private links. So it will be secure. So the other one is if you have a Docker registry running on your environment, better to have a proper network segmentation for the Docker registry, and better to have a authentication process for that. Not to give that more unauthorized permission for your Docker registry. The other one is if you have Docker registry running on the different environments, like let's say environment means different accounts. Definitely you need to make sure you are properly sharing your account through the accounts, or if you have a VPC peering, better to set up proper VPC peering to access the Docker registry which you're running on your application. And not only that, don't use public Docker registries to you are downloading stuff. Let's say the public Docker registry has some issues, so it is happening some issues. So better to have your own Docker registry and download it to your own Docker registry and use that. I'm suggesting that. I know that little bit hard task, but better to use that way. That will be more secure your environment. So other one is, as I mentioned, no need to set up any other unnecessary tools like curl, wget, especially bash, or running on your pods. So remove those things. Only run what application you are running. So and up to date your images. As I mentioned, scan your images. You can use either ECI image scanner or CLEA or whatever Anchor to scan your images regularly and get the reports if any Yeah, you can actually use this one for your pipeline. Let's say you have the pipeline. So in the first stage, when you are building your application, and the same time you can after the building up a building point, before going to the either you when you push into the application, or after push into your pre-prod environment, or whatever environment. Not only the pre-prod, you can use actually the environment also before pushing that. So you may scan the images. So if something going wrong, you need to do whatever the vulnerability tools mention about your issues. So that is best practice when you are using the pipelines and the CI/CD process. Set up your scanners in your pipeline. You can use KRL. I'm really I'm like this KRL. It has like different features. So you guys, if you need it, try this one. That's really good. And also the Docker Hub benchmark. You can use the benchmarking your Docker image just while you're doing the integration of the your applications. As I mentioned, definitely you need to secure your CI/CD process while you are doing the building process, not to pass any like environment variables and hard coded passwords into your Docker images. Make sure your Docker image is like basis all the variables and the config maps coming with the totally different with the image. No need to store anything in the image. The other one is the admission control. As I mentioned, that is the feature which is coming with the Kubernetes, which you can control more, control accessing Kubernetes, control the access levels from the Kubernetes. Let's say you have multiple image registries. You can control your access from the admission control. Only download the images from those registries, not download the stuff from the others. Let's say somebody has vulnerable pod running on your application, so it trying to download some image from the different vulnerable registry, that will be save you. So that will be more important, because if you guys know about Docker in Docker, you can run the Docker in your Docker images. That's also the other thing. You can block that one using like you can block the image registry like this. So, and make sure your image is running on the immutable way. So don't put any images like node release latest. Better to pass the tags based the release wise, but better to use this hashtag immutable hashes to download the images. What that doing is you can generate the hash which is identify what is the actual it like a MD5. It check the let's say it's a hash actually. So let's say when you if you upload your Docker image into your Docker registry, at that time it generate that hash that's point to that particular version. Let's say if you're running the let's say your application is auto scaling, it download the latest the particular version. The always it check this hash is equal to the Docker image which is running on your registry. That is more important. So not only that, I didn't mention in here. So the other thing, okay, that is the image. So these are the other main concerns, admission controls you can set up. So always pull images. So that part also really good, but that will be if you are setting in the cache, that's also good. But sometimes depending on your application, check whether how much time it take to download the image. So make sure that is good admission control for downloading the image each and every time. If some guy attacking your environment and it always download the image, that will be better secure your environment. There are a lot of other context security contexts, so you can set up through the admission control. So you can go through this link and go one by one, and what are the features you need to implement, and you can go through that. So the other one is I just need to talk about the assets accessing access privileges for the containers. So definitely when you design the containers, I think definitely you guys previous Docker security presentation, definitely go through these things. No need to have a read access for better to have a read only access, and do not run any applications as a root. Do not allow privilege escalations. Do not have the default mask proc directory. So mounting to your images. Do not use host network. That means let's say if you have That means host network means the network which is running on your nodes and network which is running on your pod should be separate, and that will be easy. If something network level attack happen, that will be secure your environment. And other thing is you can set up either drop unnecessary packages, and you can enable the SC Linux or palms in your more control, and use service accounts as I previously mentioned for running in your pod, which only have the proper access to in your service. Do not mount any credentials if it is not needed, and do not mount service account credentials into the containers if do not needed to necessary do not need to access to the API, Kubernetes API. So these are the generic things you need to consider. What you can do is so these are the points you need to set up, but within your within your organization you can create a policy. So what are the things you need to establish your environment? So each and every deployment, if you can write a custom there are a lot of custom tools you can make sure you are implemented properly. Check whether your policy is in the right way in your containers. Make sure it is running on. If something not happening, something implemented without that policy, so you not need to push into the production. So that is the more important. Definitely, that is the one of DevSecOps culture which we need to set up in our environments. So the 8 main concern is audit logging and alerting. So each and every application, not only the Kubernetes, if you have the production environment, the first thing is you need to set up proper login and also alerting. So if you have EKS, it has a feature you can enable the audit logs, push into the CloudWatch. So if you need to enable into the ELK stack or Sumo Logic or whatever, Greylog or whatever, they definitely support. There are a lot of AWS integrations with that. So you can push your logs into whatever your central login. Check whether you need to enable the cube. You need to go for the. You need to enable the audit logs. If you are using KOps, definitely there are parameter you need to pass like this. So there are a lot of other parameters you need to pass to get the proper login, audit login. Let's say the API login and the controller login coming with different ways. You can have a different tags for that and passing through the your logging environment. Better to have a dashboards if something going wrong. Let's say you are getting more error logs for your API, so you can get an alert for your monitoring guys and check whether what is happening, like what are the failures, like API errors, timeouts, stuff like that. So you need to have a better UI for that. So to doing that, you can use like Sysdetvelco is the another tool you can set up in the Kubernetes. There are a lot of other tools, so you can get the event details from the Kubernetes. If somebody running let's say somebody running a exe command, let's say somebody running get the logs, somebody running the list the data, your certs, stuff like that. You can gather all the information. You can set up a proper audit policy like this, depending on the application, depending on the requirement. Let's say if you needed all the logs and status, config map details, and stuff like that. So all the all the requirements you can set up as this. Not only that, you can control from that your audit log tool wise. Let's say you have a Sumo Logic, you can control the Sumo Logic side, or if you have an ELK side, if ELK, you can control the ELK side, having a proper filtering there, and make sure you can easily see your audit logs depending on your component, depending on your issue. So there is you can do the network level analysis. So this is nice tool, Inspector Gadget. That is really nice tool. You can see live if you're doing like debugging and stuff like that, you can use this tool to see what are the network traffics running on. That is really cool thing. So you can use this tool also if you need it. So as I mentioned, the monitoring, so you need to concern these areas when you are getting the alerts. You need to make sure you have the proper alerting and you have the proper logging. So logging everything is not good always, but logging everything is good if you properly manage the logging filters and you have the proper view, easily can see the issues. So most of the people have debug logs, like most of the, when you're doing developing the application, enable the debug log in production, you need to pay a lot of money for the like Sumo Logic or New Relic to or AWS to paying more attention, paying more unnecessarily. I feel like better to manage your logs properly and make sure you filter better. If you are not using those logs, make sure you can archive somewhere. If something going wrong, uh, um, you can get the details from there. So nine topic. So that is the Kubernetes deployment phase and running runtime security. So when you're deploying something, let's say you are deploying through the Helm or you are deploying through the Git or like Wavenet, you're deploying through the Spinnaker, whatever tool you're used to deploy the Kubernetes. So you need to make sure you deploy it properly and better secure there. So for that case, you need to have proper isolation your applications. As I mentioned, you need to use different environment for the different tenants. So make sure you isolate your environment per per environment basis, the clusters per environment basis. So if not, you need to have definitely within the cluster, you need to have different namespace, isolate your applications with the different namespace. Let's say you have multiple projects, multiple applications we are running on different namespaces, which only need to communicate each other. Make sure you isolate the namespace properly. And within the namespace, within the namespace, once you set up that, you need to put a proper network policy and for the manage your network. So as I mentioned, and also put a bit proper RBAC implemented, so to access the different services. The second thing is you need to secure your pipeline. As I mentioned, when you have a pipeline, when you're passing your variables, so better to not to put in the environment variables, let's say. And also when you're running the pipelines, if you have the logs in the pipeline, it could be Bamboo, it could be your GitLab, it could be whatever Circle CI. So whatever, most of the new CI tools, they already disable those credentials. But if you're running in your own, definitely disable your credentials printing on the your logs, which if it is doing now, definitely clear your logs. So that will be trouble in future. Somebody can read the logs. So the other one is the resource limitations. So when you set up the Kubernetes and when you're doing the deployments, consider about the resource, what kind of resource you needed. So let's say if you're running on microservice, which is running on, let's say, Java application, let's say Java 11. So when you're running the application, you can fine tune and you can harden your application with what kind of memory it needed, and the performance wise, make sure you limit the performance according to your requirement, not giving the more resource to that pod to run the stuff lot. Better to make sure you properly set up HPA, not only the pods in the Kubernetes cluster itself, like node scaling also. Better to make proper alerts. So let's say you have 50 nodes. After 50 nodes, you can make an alert. So if it is something vulnerable happening, so you can easily know about before if something going wrong. So other point is the network policy I already mentioned. So better to have a proper network policy set up in your pod level and also the cluster level, which only can talk to whatever application you needed. So that thing mainly you need to consider about ingress and whatever ingress you are running on your application, which communicate different namespaces. As example, when you're running on Nginx ingress or you are running on traffic ingress, so you are running on whatever other ingress running on your Kubernetes, which have more privileges. Make sure you tidy up the privileges which you want to run, which traffic need to access. Same as the ingress also. I'm encouraged, if you have a Kubernetes cluster, don't expose the Kubernetes cluster into the outside using the load balancers or something. Better to isolate the Kubernetes cluster into the through the API gateway or especially the API gateway, whatever AWS or whatever AWS or whatever API gateway that will be secure your Kubernetes cluster. Especially if you using any load balancers like this, better to have a TLS termination, HTTPS termination on the your load balancers. You can use this tool npool for review your network policies. So that will be help you to review your policies and make sure you are putting the right policy in the right place. So the other thing is no need to definitely thinking about the third party access. Anyway, if you're using the Kubernetes cluster, whatever environment, the AWS or whatever cloud, you need to communicate the third parties. You need to communicate the different APIs in the outside environment. You need to talking about the Kubernetes AWS resources like S3, like DynamoDB, whatever Kinesis, whatever other tools, other resources which is running on the Kubernetes. So how do you communicate that? How are you giving the access for that? So recently, AWS give you the AWS controller for the Kubernetes. It's kind of a resource you can create in the Kubernetes level. That will be great. But I know you guys not implemented yet in your production environment. For I hope you guys definitely using the proper IAM permissions and proper control for the AWS resources which you need to access, like Kube2 IAM or something like that. Not only that, if you're accessing like third-party access, definitely make sure you guys using either allowing only your NAT gateways. Let's say you are accessing the databases, like better to have either like Mongo or something like that. Better to have HTTPS access to the Mongo because it's supporting that. So if you're using the third-party, through definitely should be through the VPC peering through those third-party. If you can do that, that will be great. If not, if any public APIs, better to only whitelist your NAT gateways that only can access. So that is really good. If you are not only the whitelisting wise in the their end, in the UI end also, you need to control which application, which APIs you're going to access. That's also really important when you have a production clusters with different integrations. So to do that, actually, I have to mention the admission control also you can use to control those external access. That is really cool thing. You can use that to access the outside URLs and stuff like that. You may use admission control for that thing also. Not only that, if you are using other resources, as I mentioned, IAM and stuff like that, other resources, you need to properly use IAMs, IAM roles properly, and also the proper ACLs and the security groups. And if you have a VPC peering or private links, definitely make sure you are putting the right access only for particular VPC. So that will be a mess if something going wrong. If you have multiple integrations with the production environment. Last one, at not least. So time is going really fast. So anyway, I'm trying to give the few informations about the credentials and the certs also. So that is my last point. Talking about the Kubernetes or whatever environment, you need to make sure your certs are in proper way. So in the Kubernetes, you can let's say you are using KEOPS, or like let's say you are using EKS, you can use AWS Kubernetes secrets. So secret is not actually the vault kind of thing, also encrypted thing. It's like a base 64 encoded. But let's say if you have the Kubernetes secrets, if some developer accidentally have the access to the view or access or something like access to the certs, they can easily see the certs. So I'm encouraged to not to, if you are using these, if you don't have any other things, definitely go for AWS secrets. So if you need to secure your environment a little bit more, definitely you need to use tools like other tools like to encrypt your environment. Like better one is the Vault, which is HashiCorp product, which you can use to working with the Kubernetes stuff supposed to work. If not, so you can use AWS. If it is AWS, definitely you can use AWS Secret Manager. You can call AWS API, get the secrets there, implement there while you're doing the pipeline or deployment process. So if it is not, you can use like another cloud providers like Cloud KMS, if you're using Google. So if you're using Azure Vault. So if you're using other open source tools, like you can use Vault. So if you can go for the enterprise, so you can use Seal Circuits, or if you can use KretStash. That's also use AWS DynamoDB to create the certs. So that's also the open source tools which you can implement. So within the certs, definitely make sure your certs are up to date, rotate properly, and make sure you are running your application up to date certs. So the other one is the pipeline security. When you are other thing is the git actually source control pipeline security. So if you have a source control running on the git, or you are using the Bitbucket, if you have accidentally, anybody can accidentally push your credentials into the your GitLab or somewhere your source code. That will be a bigger trouble. Anywhere it could be happen anytime. So definitely make sure you can use like git certs, like kind of tools which running on your laptop, to before going to push your code into the your public your repositories. Make sure you are not adding any certs into your GitLab, so or whatever source control. So you may scan regularly your source control to check whether is any API keys in your source control. So if you find out anything, definitely I'm encouraged to create the history, delete the history also, so that otherwise if you delete it and commit it, the history you can see easily. So these are the, not only the Kubernetes, these are the best practices when you are setting in the actually GitOps environment. So as I mentioned, rotate your secrets each and every time, monitor them. You may have a policy, open policy for to the rotating the certs. It may be harder, but you need to do that. So you need to implement proper pipeline to rotating the certs and implement it. So there are different ways you can do it in the AWS also. You can use lambdas to do that, or there are a lot of ways you can do that. So admins, definitely you should have a MFA enabled in your AWS account, so which you have the admin access to your AWS node access for the Kubernetes wise. Definitely NFA, then we know about your credentials are not leaking out to other parties. um, the finally, so always review your network policy, IAM permissions, and all the pod access, especially the pod security. So you can definitely set up the pod security for in the Kubernetes wise. Make sure your pods are secure, not running vulnerable stuff, and not having the unnecessary access into the pod running as a root or like stuff like that, and putting the stuff into the environment variables which you can see easily, get pods and or list pods, get pods and see the credentials, stuff like that. Make sure you are not doing that. Secure your pods properly, the deployments properly as well. You may use different types of tools to control your AWS resources. You can use either AWS config to control your AWS configuration, resource configurations, to check whether you are uh, managing your resources in proper way, proper tagging and proper configurations are there. If something change, you may notify. I know it is really expensive, but there are a lot of other ways, open source tools you can use. Audit to RBAC also you can use for the audit your RBAC stuff, and uh, Pro- Prowler you can use for the your audit your AWS account. That will be help you. That's an open source tool. That's you can run your own using the AWS API keys and check whether if you have any issues in your roles or access policies like S3 policies and stuff like that. Because you are using Kubernetes with the AWS, you need to make sure other integrations also secure. So other components also secure. Uh, Actually, I go a little bit faster today because I need to cover a few stuffs in here. It's a little bit tough to giving you more information about the security. I'm really happy actually if I can do some kind of a session with like more times. So with like one day session or something, but I know it's really hard to doing that like this. So definitely, if you are really keen to know about the Kubernetes security and stuff like that, go through with the public Kubernetes blogs and also the Slack channels. And especially I'm encourage you to listen to the Google podcast. That is really good. So you will be get the new issues and new features which is having in the Kubernetes. So anyway, I feel like I cover what I want to do today. So, but I know it's a little bit faster, and also it's it's a little bit harder for like developers or some guys who are beginning to the Kubernetes. but I feel like I may give some idea about you guys, so to giving you a better understanding of the main pain points in the Kubernetes. So anyway, guys, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer if you have a time. So Nilesh, if you can, you can hand over. I am happy to hand over you if anybody need to answer any questions. So if you have any chat, uh,
Yeah,
yeah, I can
yeah.
answer.
So one person is asking a question. He's asking whether it is possible to do any kind of isolation to affected pods on KH level while an attack is going on. So he's asking a question like that. How would you handle such a scenario?
So let's say if you know about the pods, so it's depending on the attack actually. So let's say attack means like, I don't know what kind of attacks he's saying. Like, let's say that pod is vulnerable, definitely the Docker image is vulnerable, so don't need to run in the Kubernetes. So what you can do is either you can go for new release for that pod, but if you need to isolate, so the thing is, if you're running a pod, definitely you can use network policies, you can use the admission control to not to having like RBAC, not to having access to the Kubernetes API, like which control like master nodes or whatever other APIs pod can control, like that vulnerable guy can control. So the application, as I mentioned, if you set up proper uh, Docker best practices in your application, definitely, let's say if you have the so it's a little bit hard question to answer, because the thing is I don't know what kind of attacks is going on. But I will answer for different ways. Let's say you have vulnerable Docker image which has, like, let's say which trying to do some vulnerable thing to your application, not the Kubernetes. You can definitely control using your network policies and stuff like that. But definitely I'm encouraged to not to run it in your Kubernetes level. What you can do is either you can create suddenly like different node. Yeah, that's also not making any sense. If you create a new different node group that also have a vulnerable access into the your Kubernetes cluster, you don't have any chance. So that's a little bit hard. So make sure, definitely, if it is something going wrong in your pods, definitely make sure not run it in your production environment. Trying to isolate from the environment as you can. So best thing is you can use better network policy and check whether. So as I mentioned, you can if you properly set up your event uh, logs from the Kubernetes, you can see whether that pod trying to access your environment, like trying to communicate to your masters or API, stuff like that. If yes, better to you can put either you can destroy that application with running on your environment. If not, if it is not accessing, if it is only, like, let's say if it is auto scaling suddenly, trying to like it's a memory leak or something like that, it's not need to worry about too much. But if it is really attack, definitely you need to worry. So yeah, hopefully he got the answer.
Yeah, and another thing is that running, running container sandboxes, right? If the container is affected, you can run either gvisor or kata containers or something like that, and then 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 it won't affect the node and the rest of the containers that are running. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also another solution. But the only thing is, let's say if we don't know what kind of vulnerability is there.
Yeah.
Let's say if your Kubernetes is vulnerable, so let's say Tila kind of thing. So that is we don't have any chance to do that. Either you are running on your container in your application, so that will be not to get that kind of chances. Like, it's depending on, yes, it's that is another thing you can do. So yeah,
Yeah.
is there any questions, guys?
Yeah, guys, do you have any questions? I mean, you can either type it here or you can just unmute yourselves and ask. I think I don't see any other questions. To be honest, Kasun, you sort
Yeah.
of covered everything. Like when you went slide by slide, I had questions, and then the next slide, you sort of answered those questions.
Yeah, it's really hard to like having creating these slides because the first day I thought think about it is like a 2 hour thing. Then I created because these kind of slides which I already did the webinar in Auckland, so it is out 3 hours. So I today I covered it 1 hour. It's really
Yeah.
faster because it has some actually it has some uh, like practice stuff. I can like demo stuff is there, so
Hmm.
today I can't do that. So
Yeah.
sorry about that. Then that's why I share some slides, so with some commands. uh,
I think, Kasun, I think maybe next we will have another session where you can do a demo also, and then we can sort
yeah,
of like cover a few slides that you like. We can
yeah,
have
definitely,
webinar
definitely.
that we can. So
Yeah,
we can sort of have a secret series if we want to. So we'll do another one neatly where you would do a demo and
yeah,
sort of like show practically, like you already showcase the issues and sort of like the workarounds or how to mitigate those. But let's do a demo in the next session so that you
yeah.
show them how to harden the nodes, etc., etc. So I think that would really help the community.
Yeah, definitely. So that is the main things. Like you can find out a lot of things in the documented things in the Google or whatever, but we need to think about how we're going to implement. And while we implementing, there are some number of issues. It could be some number of issues while you implement. Yeah. So anyway, so hopefully you guys happy with what I did today. So
Yeah, yeah. So one last question, Kasun.
okay,
Just last one.
okay,
Uh, like you're mostly invested in AWS. So when
yeah.
you run Kubernetes in AWS, like, would you recommend to run it in EKS, or do you recommend to use something like Rancher and run it with VMs?
Uh, that is actually it's depending on your requirement. Like the EKS also have a lot of limitations. Like
Hmm.
you know EKS integration with other, like let's say if you have a EKS with definitely if you want to, as example, if you want to do the like expose your ingress endpoints, you may need to use private links and net gateway and attach into the AWS API gateway. There are a lot of things you need to consider. And sometimes if you're going to there are a lot of limitations. That's the only one I mentioned. And especially when you're upgrading the cluster, sometimes I recently had an issue when with the EKS. So once we upgrade the cluster, some ingresses are not propagate properly, and some we need to do it manually. Like, so I got a lot of issues while I'm doing with EKS, with especially with the integrate with other third party applications. Like, still it's developing, and the API gateway also in the AWS, that's also developing. But let's say if you have a different API gateway, that won't be different problem. So it's depending on the requirement, to be honest. So if you have like uh, if you want to manage your environment more, and if you want to customize a little bit more, definitely you need to go like KEOPS or whatever uh, tool you need to deploy. But if you go for Rancher, the Rancher give you like different types of features. Like you can have a deployment, so you don't have a EKS like deployment process. Like they will give you some more features for the deployments. You need to worry about that. So yeah, that's pros and cons. So yeah, depending on, I think it's depending on your budget, and depending on your how many uh, people who involve with the management for the Kubernetes cluster. Let's say depending on the resource, and also the price wise, and also your the application availability and stuff like that. Yeah,
Yeah, I think, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So and yeah, I think yeah, because I have also used EKS, AKS, and GK. I think EKS, it's a little. I think it's still getting there.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, definitely. This EKCTL recently upgrade, no,
yeah.
so they don't have like, still they don't have any, like if you need to upgrade, you need to update the node groups. You need to have to create a different node groups, and you need to move it. You need to do it a little bit manually sometimes. I mean, manually means you can set up a pipeline, but it's a little bit painful. Like KEOPS, you can do it one command or something. Yeah, it's like yeah, mm, it is getting there, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, yeah, and the other thing is, cousin. Yeah, sorry, I said the last question.
No, no, that's fine. That's fine.
Last. Okay. So in your slides, you mentioned open source cloud native software, and also you mentioned AWS specific sort of tools.
Yeah.
So when people are adapting to Kubernetes and then running in on EKS or whatever, what should they give priority? Should they give priority to AWS tools, or should they give priority to cloud native tools, which means that they can sort of like go into hybrid cloud solutions if they want to, like go
Yeah,
into on
actually,
premises or.
yeah, so that's a good question. So that is actually for me, my perspective. I was trying to go for the native first because if it is open source, we don't need to pay for anything. So, but the other thing is the painful thing is if something going wrong, how we can react that. So anyway, the
Yeah.
AWS always encourage to use their resources and their tools. Like that's why they always combine each other. You can't do it without like you can't do it. You can't integrate the API gateway without having a network load balancer. Stuff like that. So they always try to give you uh, try to use their try to actually enforce you to use their resources, and that's also sometimes trouble. But I'm always trying to uh, suggest you like working with especially Kubernetes. It has a lot of community based cloud native tools. So if you kind of try that, definitely you need to try it. And if any tool, mostly people were reviewing properly, and if had not issues and stuff like that, so that maybe better to go for that and try it first. So if not, if you're painful in the time being and the resource wise for managing the Kubernetes, you may go for the AWS resource. So but still I'm feeling like Kubernetes EKS and the other integration wise, still it's not strong to use production environment with the different the Kubernetes, uh, like like uh, like uh, like different types of integration with the Kubernetes. I feel it's still the AWS is still growing up. We need to consider some other tools.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Actually, as example, like if I have time to, I just describe one thing. So let's say in future,
Oh,
definitely, like let's say you have a queue running on in SQS, and you need to auto scale your pods through that queue, like like we use like Fargate or something. So they will have another feature like you will be have a resource through the Kubernetes, like which you can integrate your auto scaling depending on your queue or depending on your alerts or whatever. If AWS have that kind of features in future, definitely, so it will be a
yeah.
major hit
It
for
will
the
be
other.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think even Google or Azure doesn't have that functionality, even though they have pub sub and everything else, but doesn't really have the Kubernetes integration.
Yeah, still
So
still still every every cloud providers, they are integrating,
yeah,
working with that. Yeah.
like looking at the architecture, it's very difficult also to integrate something like that
Yeah.
within
Yeah.
Kubernetes. To uh, well, there are so many things involved. Like if you can get events running, like you can get Knative or
Yeah.
that sort of.
Otherwise they need to customize total Kubernetes
Yeah,
code.
yeah,
Yeah, it will be a different tool then.
yeah. Then it's going to be a different, and then again there would be vendor locking.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, that's true.